Afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday, October 11th, 2022 at 12:12 p.m. and I will now call the meeting into order.
Thanks, Melinda. The first order of business is to review and approve the minutes.
You just note who's present in the room for the judge for the minutes, please, and that those are the people who are in the forum.
Yes, so to have quorum, we have Ryan Wallace, Bunny Smith, and Jamal Johnson. Teresa is joining us digitally. I'm not sure if that means that Teresa, so yeah, Chris is shaking her head. So Teresa can't vote today, but she
Thank you so much.
And our first order of business is to approve the minutes from our 2 meetings in September. My motions.
I'll second.
Seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you. So moving on to the admin report. So I'm going to square up what's the goals for the day. So today's goals are to review and approve the 2023 proposed budget for the ABO with reflecting edits that were suggested the last meeting. So we'll go over that and I'll show you the edits. Then we need to review and approve the Greater Preston Promise Neighborhood Roots contract extension that we discussed at the last meeting. And that'll happen in the ABO update section. We also need to execute our option agreement with HHA, so we can talk about that in the property disposition section. Other items for today, we need to clarify and discuss the gaps within the relationship between the mayor's office, the Housing Trust Fund, and HCDPA in terms of especially contracts around Michelle's payment and just making sure that we're setting up an appropriate audit trail with regards to how Michelle gets paid through grant funding that comes through our agency. And also when the Housing Trust Fund Board recommends salaries, for example, like how that gets operationalized in HCDPA. So I think we should take time today to make sure we're all on the same page about the needs there. And one thing that we can also talk about in that vein is thinking through like the strategic plan for this agency. We don't have to working towards that isn't really on the agenda for today because we A, are just barely at quorum and B, I think we need more time to prepare, but I think we could also ask some questions of Chris about HCDPA specific powers as an agency and what makes us what potential we have that's separate from the mayor's office and the not just to be a fiscal sponsor for the Housing Trust Fund, but like as an urban renewal agency, what are the things that we can do before we sort of look toward seeking additional grant funding or something like that to run programs out of this agency. Yeah, and then one more note. So I spoke last week about the library's interest in working with us to preserve and activate the urban renewal archival records that this agency has in our possession. And she heard from a New York State Department of Ed grant opportunity from a program called Consider the Source, which works to get primary historical source materials into the hands of educators in elementary schools and secondary schools in New York. And they have about $1,000 available to help in collaboration with the library to begin to digitize some of those records. So none of that money would come through HCDPA most likely, but yeah, so there's some movement in that regard. And we're going to be meeting soon to talk about that. But
can I ask, are the archives now belonging to the library or are they your documents?
They are our documents,
okay.
But the library is also, I haven't been able to give this conversation a deep exploration from the library, but I know there's some interest in stewarding those records And I guess we would just talk about what that means in the
I
room.
think you would just want to have a letter of agreement or something like that. The library is an appropriate agency to hold them, but I think you want to have something right in the documents, what documents are going to.
Exactly. So, yeah, and the first step in that process would be to do like a deep assessment of what we have. We have about 30 bankers boxes full of records, some of which are kind of decomposed, you know, so there's a real needs assessment, step one. So we're a ways off from, I think, like knowing what would be in that letter of agreement with the library. And I don't even know what their capacity is in terms of their storage space, but that's just something that I'm working on the side and volunteering my time because we don't have a lot of money for that. So I'm using the admin report to just kind of organize ourselves for what we're doing today. So next, a financial report. So the board was sent a bank reconciliation from QuickBooks that shows the funds that moved through our account, and just basically ensures transparency that we didn't write any strange checks that didn't go in a public meeting. But there was an issue on my part with QuickBooks where I've been trying to more accurately reflect like our bill process and accounts receivable, but ran into some hiccups and did not want to display a bunch of false information in public. So I prepared something separate just to explain our current standing, and I will put it here. So, and then let me make this larger. Okay, so this is just talking about our bank statements and our cash in hand. Nothing has changed in terms of our long-term liabilities, our grants, or our loans that Galvin will pay us in the next 10 years, or our properties. But currently we have $588,933.05 in a segregated bank account. That is the Housing Trust Fund's budget. Then, after our reconciliation, and with Teresa that performed on Sunday, and an additional charge for a bill that we approved last meeting for the public hearing notice for the Register Star. So this is our current available funds in our Bank of Green County account. That is combined HCDPA general funds and the ADLN grant funds. Based on a expense tracker that Michelle and I have been fastidiously maintaining over the years, there are approximately $39,000 unspent in the ADLN grant. That is inclusive of a bill that we have not yet paid to BFJ, that housing consultant that Michelle's been working with. So we still owe them a wire that we approved on September 20th. So I'm working on that. $2,750.
And that takes this into account?
That is held by the ADL and remainder unspent, and so.
Without the requisition for the wire, so.
Yes, basically what would happen is that this number would go down and this number would, it would zero out. So we don't need to worry about that in terms of this bottom line for HCDPA. It's accounted in the remainder. Also so that's this is the negative funds that will come out of the account for ADLN. At the end of, in July, Michelle presented a plan for reorganizing the ADLN grant across different line items and unspent funds. And we determined that of those $39,000 of the remaining unspent ADLN funds, we would hold basically the remainder of the admin and operations line item to go back into HCDPA's general fund to kind of account for the audit and legal services and things like that we would be paying for. So with that as a positive number, that brings our general fund current standing $8,209.02. Oh gosh, and this, instead of finishing this last detail, I was setting up the Zoom. So today's bills are a $330 fee for 9 months of admin services. BFJ is not something we need to approve this week. That was the $2,750. Apologies if this is not complete. And then Chris's invoice for legal counsel was included in the packet of materials for this week, and I have them tangible.
Could you tell me, just mention, what is BFJ? Could you say what it is, please?
Yeah, and to be clear, that check, it's just an unpaid bill, but it does not come out of the bottom, the HCDPA general fund. It comes out of the ADLN grant fund, and it is the housing consultant that we approved months ago that supports Michelle.
What is the names again? BFJ, that's the name?
That's the acronym for the firm.
Okay,
Yeah, it's, you know, some people's names.
okay, yeah, that is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and they're helping Michelle execute some of the technical aspects of the
And
job.
that is coming out grant funds, not HC.
Yeah, yeah, so that $2,750 is included in this remaining unspent funds, $39,000 of the ADLN. And then I am seeing an additional, this looks like about $1,000, a little over $1,200 of legal fees from our most recent invoice from Chris. But that invoice is in your packet, and I can pull it up now if you want to look at it together. So that's the financial report. Do you want to look at these invoices? Yes, that's in there too, but it's only $20. It's $23 of ADLN funds that, again, that was an invoice that was in your email. So do we want to review the bills in more detail, or do you?
I'm comfortable, I review them, I don't know if anyone else, okay, but I'm comfortable. I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion to pay the bills.
A second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you. Great. Resolutions and motions. I don't think we had, is this where we would consider?
Yeah, you have a resolution for that.
Great, that's a problem.
Right, we have actually two things. We have a motion to approve the attachment to the option agreement. The resolution approving the option agreement last time. But if you recall, we had a conceptual description of the provisions of a redevelopment agreement to be attached, and we now have the actual text of the redevelopment agreement. So, the board would like to discuss that or ask questions. And then, I think at some point today, you want to consider a motion to approve that form to be attached to the option agreement.
Okay. So we're talking about the option form that you.
The option form was approved, so this is an attachment to the option form. That implements or would implement the affordability requirements that the board discussed as a condition to approval of the option agreement.
Do we have the ability to approve this? Does Ravonna need to recuse herself for this vote?
That's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
We need another person. We don't have anybody else who can come.
Well, yeah, Dominic totally makes it here.
Dominic sent it forth and Teresa sent it forth.
She's not here. I mean, she.
Come on, rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, well, so,
Yeah, we have to table it
I guess.
for special
Well,
meeting.
I really wanna, maybe you should schedule a special meeting and you guys can all get together.
I mean, I can get-
You could continue the meeting
continue this meeting, yeah, there's no
as an
question.
open meeting to tomorrow at 3:30 or 5 o'clock, at which time some of you will be in the meeting. Yes,
This little game.
right?
For
First
con-
thing in the morning tomorrow.
Oh,
Yeah.
is it
Yeah, it's 9:30 in the
Oh,
morning.
sorry.
That's why I'm like, I don't know where you're gonna be at 5:30?
9:30.
All right,
And it's
all right.
9:30 tomorrow morning, and then the council meeting is tomorrow at 6.
Okay, so tomorrow morning, or tomorrow evening, whatever you guys.
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
I mean, it's gotta be tight.
So who are our members?
Dominic, Teresa,
And Teresa.
come on.
And myself,
And, okay, so we could do this tomorrow.
yeah.
Or we could do it at 9.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting 9 AM, because then this way we'll be done within 30 minutes.
How about after your meeting?
He said I can't, unfortunately. I have a full-time job. I don't have contractors.
Me too.
Get up early.
So we're saying 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Yes.
So again, now the special meeting about a continuation of this meeting, and so at the end of the meeting, instead of adjourning the meeting, continue the meeting to tomorrow at the time. certain,
9 a.m.
whatever, 9 o'clock.
Correct.
9 AM where?
Here.
No, wait,
No, at the
no.
CEDC
At the
offices.
CEDC
Yeah.
office, so
Oh,
that
thanks for coming.
we don't have to be running back and forth.
Correct.
Okay, I'm sorry, I think that's probably the quickest, easiest way
Fine.
to resolve it.
Where are the seats?
The old, the bank building, the old,
One has it.
has a pretty area.
I see, okay. Is it possible for, do I need to be at this meeting? I also have a full-time job.
Right, no.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's the one. But you, yeah.
No, as long as we, yeah, we've got what you do.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll just make sure before we.
All right, so.
A motion to.
We'll do it at, yeah, so we're just postponing and taking over this agenda item.
Okay, great.
So in the meantime, did anybody have any questions about the language?
No, I think language is great, you reflected it very accurately.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay,
There's a greater Hudson Thomas,
right, so, pardon, or.
which is just a continuation of what we decided about making sure they can get through the rest of the funds for displacement before. Did we update that to December 25th or December 9th?
I believe it's November 25th for spending.
No, we said it's November, December 9th for reporting, that's right.
Correct.
So I knew there was a 25 in there.
So, do we
Have a motion on the resolution.
yeah, so here's also the resolution. Ryan Sullivan. Yes, anybody have any questions on this resolution?
No.
See it. Oh, I see it. Got it. Yeah. Thank you.
So this was discussed at the last meeting and just extends our pre-existing Hudson Roots mini grant, where Greater Hudson Promise Neighborhoods is distributing.
What they had left, was it 9 or you distributed a little bit since then, right?
They had about
5.
under 5.
Oh, they had under 5 left, that's right, all right, yeah.
Yeah. And they've been going through the funds slowly in a good way because they're able to,
Yeah, but they're actually getting it out.
yeah.
So it's an extension of time and not money.
Correct, yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, so let's have a vote. Yolanda?
I think we need a motion and a second.
All motion.
Apologies.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Thanks, so we're.
Aye.
Aye, Teresa cannot vote, unfortunately.
Can I proxy my vote?
No.
No.
You have to be present,
Mr.
your body's gotta be here.
Mr. Mayor?
Aye.
Teresa is absent, Dominic is absent.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So that's how it's over. What other, just throwing the floor to Michelle, any other development updates?
Yes. Well, that's examples of
Yes.
You're channeling your inner alternate?
yes, I've been getting stage direction.
Yeah.
Yes, presenting. So the Hudson Roots, with the same amount of money extended, I'll give an update next month on what's left. We are continuing with our CDPG housing rehab, we're in environmental review period. So once we're through with that, then we have to receive our funds. And we applied for another 200,000 from Restore, and we can hear back on that. And then once we also have our firm for grant delivery and admin hired, and they're certified in like lead-based paint and like mold remediation and all sorts of environmental testing. So they'll do site visits to all the houses. Once we get permission from the state to do that, then we can select our applicants. Once we have that, I'll give you all an update of like how many households we're able to help, and then how many we're gonna try and leverage other funds from, and get kind of creative about how we can help everybody as possible.
So Michelle, that's funded fully from a CDBG grant?
Yeah,
So it's not an HCDPA program, it's just.
yeah. The housing trust.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other, so Carney is our, housing, we're moving forward with that proposal, for development. BFJ, we saw the invoice, they've given me 2 out of 5 of their deliverables. I had some feedback and want some other things updated, so we're working on those, and I should be looking for their deliverables sometime in the next couple of weeks, so they're on target with all of their deliverables. So the 2 they gave me was for, looking at funds for the housing trust fund for long-term revenue, and looking at, moving land trust governance options. And then the big one they've been kind of chugging along with is inclusionary zoning feasibility. You can probably expect another invoice for them next month, most likely.
Maybe a check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The housing trust fund, so I sent the minutes from the last meeting to you all. The big thing we're working on to finish out this year, number 1 is creating grant guidelines. So we kind of have been drafting those so that once we get into getting that larger sums of money, we have some pretty clear guidelines for people to understand what we're looking for funding. And also to pass on all of the enterprise requirements. And then the other piece is looking at, so depending on if you all approve their proposed budget to spend $50,000 in 2022, the board kind of ranked their top options for how to spend the money at last month's meeting. So I guess the plan would be, hypothetically, if you guys approve that budget, that amount today, then I'd come to you in November with how they want to spend that money for you to approve. Because
How they would want to spend it in 2023
for 2022.
for this year.
Yeah, basically to allocate it. So basically, they have, the plan was they set aside $50,000 for the rest of 2022.
Mhm.
The idea being that we can basically fund 3 types of things. One would be different policy studies or research. The second one being supporting capacity to other nonprofits or groups such as Hudson Roots, as an example. And the third one being larger sums of money to leverage development or rehabbing buildings. And so we're looking to do some bigger things in 2023, and we're kind of laying the groundwork right now in terms of the guidelines and also researching best way to use the money. But the board wants to get some small things in motion now. So what they want to do is to, the 4 things they'd like to do is to first set aside a little bit of money for studying, to build off some of what BJ does. So one of their deliverables is looking at like a housing affordability zoning overlay to loosen up some of the zoning requirements to allow some more flexible housing types. That's just like a basic policy primer. This money would be to actually write that zoning. So we kind of present to the council, like, here's an idea. Do you guys like this idea? If the council likes it, then we can put some money into actually writing some of those zoning overlays. That's one thing the Housing Trust Fund Board is thinking about. The second one is putting a little bit of money into looking, is there any incentives for landlords who currently or would rent below market rate, like some mom and pop landlords? Is there any kind of incentives that we can work with in terms of like tax levels or something? So those are small things, and basically we don't have that number because I need to look at research in terms of what those consultants are asking for. So those are the 2 small policy things that Housing Trust Board wants to do. The other 2 things, one would be continuing Hudson Roots and about like $5,000 a month for the next couple of months. And the third thing would be, once we get those numbers of what the gaps are in terms of households who are interested in receiving the DBG repair work and how much we have, they want to contribute some funds to cover some of those gaps. So
That's a lot of the, yeah.
Yes. So that,
Yeah.
yeah, so their idea is to hit like, policy, housing rehab, and some capacity. And that, if we get that number approved all today, then we can actually put a formal, I'm like introducing it to you, they put like a formal, they'd like to vote on it together at their November meeting, and I can present that to you. Because you said that this board has to approve line items.
Does that meet our deadline for when because we have to consider that right into our budget as we're the pass-through the ADO? Will we still hit our deadline for voting and submission in Paris to do that?
Yes, if we.
there's a big if, yeah.
It's not that huge of an if, what Michelle's asking for is how to do that, so if we,
Yeah.
if we say that that we are gonna set aside 50K for HDF activities to
Right.
be enacted this year. And that gives them the confidence that they can like put together some of these numbers, and then we will have a second round of approval of the specifics.
Right.
So.
So you want to put it through as a placeholder budget with then final approval of what the dispensation of the funds will go to, because ultimately all does need to go through the accounting mechanism.
I guess the question is, it's probably going to be used in the 2023, so it's like, if you guys want to put it in the 2023 budget.
Right.
That's what I was just trying to figure out.
Yeah.
I just kind of need to get a sense of like, if
That's
I'm
what
gonna
we're
start.
saying, we're gonna park the money and then,
Yeah, but it really is the 2023 budget.
Correct.
not-
correct,
Yeah.
Well, but the 2022 budget is also a lot larger, because you're gonna do more.
Yeah,
Right, I understand, but I mean, it's $50,000, you're not really gonna spend that this year. Right?
I mean, probably not.
no,
The thing is, like, I guess we can move to 2023.
I think you're gonna have a cleaner
Yeah,
line of reporting.
I think what I want is a sense of like, is this approved, so that if I start getting quotes, you know what I mean, for consultants and doing the groundwork.
So procedurally, you have a couple of different steps. One, you have a budgetary action, which is to identify amounts that you can make available for certain purposes. But every expenditure that the board then has to make has to be approved as an authorization for an expenditure. A contract, for example, with a party who's gonna do work for the, whatever consulting or a contract with whoever's gonna carry it out, like, the House of Roots. And then I don't know, the CDBG thing, we'll have to talk about how that could be implemented, when you're getting more detail on how you do that. So, each one of those things has to be approved by the board, and there's a contractual obligation to do that. So when you present the proposal, present the specifics of not just the dollar amount, but who's doing the work and how that can happen.
So my understanding, I guess what I don't understand is like, we have the budget, right, in terms of like, we want to do.
Budget's just a budget, the budget is not an implementing, document.
Right, but my understanding is I have to get the budget approved, right, before I go into all the work of putting out, like, I can't put out an RFP unless I know this budget's been approved, right?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that you don't deal with the budget today. I'm just saying that once, you can put a number in the budget, but you can't spend it until you.
Right,
That's all.
Okay.
Or you can't encumber it until you get an order from the board.
Okay, so meta level, I'm actually hearing a lot of alignment here, that so Michelle's trying to get some confirmation that we can approve on the scale of
Right,
project.
my only question for her was 2023 or 2024.
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
You guys
that's,
had to decide that.
yeah, where do we park it?
I guess we would say 2023,
It should go 23, yeah, because at this point,
yeah.
we're not gonna spend it by December 9th.
Yeah. Okay, I need to think about how that's held in this current budget, but, we'll go over that in a second. Okay.
We would also leave it as is and then do a budget amendment next year if you want to like add more funding to 2023.
That you can do.
Will you restate that for me?
So we leave things as is for this year. It doesn't preclude her from doing the groundwork and the legwork and
I
figuring
see.
things out. And then, once we're in the new year, we don't have to refile. We can always increase the budget as long as you're reporting it to the state that additional funds have been approved and allocated
Right,
out
it's
of
just a budget.
Correct.
Okay, let me see, yeah. We did budget. I'm just looking back at the recommendations that I tried to incorporate into the overall draft budget. Okay, so it seems like if we approve this overall ADO budget, which holds Michelle's recommended budgets from the Housing Trust Fund, then we're not executing anything, but we are, setting the framework for Michelle to start to build some of these more detailed proposals.
Right.
Okay. Really cool set of projects. I mean, that's I'm excited.
I think we're going to figure out the feedback of like, they have, their advisory committee has recommendations, we all see that, and so we're still working that timeline and balance.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to give you all like advance notice of like, this is coming down the pipeline and getting your thoughts, so that's not surprising.
Yeah. Thanks.
Before you're done, the other thing that you guys have to resolve, is you're gonna have to address the contractual agreement with the city.
Correct.
Because the city's agreement only, extended the first 2 quarters of 2022 for unalien grant for the, housing justice position. So I think you need to work with maybe Heather and Michael and Mayor on, what does that contractual, and you, yes, what does that contractual limit look like? Where's the money supposed to be, and how much is it, and for which year? And then where is it coming from? Because it's all supposed to be coming from the ALDN funds, right? Correct.
Yes, though.
Or the housing trust.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. But I'm not entirely clear, because I don't have all these papers in front of me. Is the housing trust fund money only starting in 2023, or are those expenditures starting now?
They can.
2022?
And I was noticing this when we were doing when I was crunching the numbers on the HCDPA bottom line, but yeah, I mean, the Q3, Q4, I think some of that, that makes sense. Okay, so
Okay, so you don't have a contract that says that, so the contract needs to be amended. So you guys need
Well, the
to.
contract for 22 needs to be amended,
22
there needs to be a
needs to be
new
amended.
one in place for 23, so we need to.
Yeah. Right, so we need to get that done. And so I guess what I would ask is that if you guys can talk about, outline about, exactly what those numbers are that are supposed to go into the rider, then we can, consider that approval for today. Because it should match with what the city's doing,
that makes sense.
so that the city can bill HCDPA.
Appropriately for, right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Likewise, any contract work that you do, Chris, with regards to Michelle's position or other housing trust fund things, we want to bill it separately.
Okay.
I noticed that there were 2 separate bills too for
So
the,
I created 2, but I can create 3, yes, I thought you might want to separately account for the property acquisition project.
right,
So I built that
Which
separate
is smart, yes.
account
yeah,
that you can then account for it that way. But you can also do the same for the ALDM stuff.
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin.
And some of that is already out, hopefully we can break it down.
That checks out, so I can go back through and try to. Yes, exactly, maybe not the, yes, okay, that's.
Yeah, we're going forward.
That's enough.
Can I say something? I know I'm not there personally, but can we move the microphone away from the lady with the bags? It really interferes with everybody talking. I can't understand you guys. I'm hearing just,
Thanks, Teresa. I wish I'd thought of that sooner.
I've been sending the host little messages. Who is the host?
If you haven't noticed, the host is juggling a lot of things right now, so.
I'm sorry. No,
No, I didn't see your
Thank you.
your chats. I appreciate you. Sorry about that, Teresa. Here, that's
okay. If it was you, I apologize. I thought it was somebody else over there not reading their messages.
Yeah, I should have thought about that. Thanks to Gina for your work.
Don't worry, Sarah. We forgive you for everything.
Important jobs in the city.
Continue to live, that's all.
Thank you. I will. Okay, so the next step, so it's the Chris, Michelle, Heather, the mayor, and also Ryan. Do we point to Ryan? Also needs to circle.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it's just
Teresa.
administrative
Teresa
function, yeah.
needs
Well,
to,
Teresa's treasurer, she knows what's going on.
yeah. So, but in the back end,
Right,
the four of y'all need to have, or the three of y'all.
right, I think so, yeah.
For 2022 contract amending and for 2023
2023, right.
Okay, is that it for the HTF ADLN zone? Okay,
So, Mike, what's that?
next, we are going to discuss the proposed budget for the ABO. And I think that the best way to do that is to share my screen this way, so. Okay, so, gosh, can't win. So I've shared it with the Zoom participants, but the people present in the room can't see it, so let me figure out the best way to do that. So what I'm displaying, and I'll show it to the Zoom participants in just a second, is our previous draft from last week, and then our current draft, and I will make these larger. Just give me 1 second. Great, so now we're looking here at this desktop. This is what we were working with last week, and let's make it bigger and legible. Not last week, last month. Let's do this. And we noted a problem with the way that our operating revenues were, or the housing trust fund income was being represented as like operating revenues instead of showing that we were a pass-through.
Yeah, it needs to be a net credit and net loss.
Yes, and what I also noticed, so the problem that fixing that raise then was also needing to represent that we actually are receiving some operating revenues from the HTF. Just an like $10,000 a year is what we started allocating in 2023.
Correct.
So putting that away, this is the updated version. Wow, Ryan, I love the formality. Folks just saw Ryan almost scaling with.
Christ is taller than I am. There we go.
So these numbers are the same. I checked, and so the math is the same as what we looked at last week.
Where did the $10,000 come from again?
It is subtracted from these other non-operating revenues
Right.
that are.
The 10,000, Teresa, is what the Housing Trust Fund pays us as an administrative fee annually. So that
Okay,
they
that's
operate
exactly
function
what
every-
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask. So we collecting a fee? Yes, thank you.
So likewise, the $25,000 option payment that we, I suppose, are expecting in 2022, I've added all of the.
You want that in a different line as a conditional.
We don't, there's no other lines other than what these lines are.
That's it,
So
all right.
find a line for it, but there's no other way to represent.
Do you have a place where you can footnote things like that for the board? Maybe in a separate report?
Yes, for the.
Yeah, for us, yeah, but I'm just thinking like in the Paris system, if there was because I just don't want to count it if it's not
I know,
if it's an if.
but yeah.
Well, this is an estimate.
Right, it's fair.
Likewise, I represented ADLN charges or ADLN reimbursements for our general fees here and here. So this is the 25,000 plus 70. That includes the $6,000 that we were just talking about. So that's there. These two numbers then, revenues are ADLN expenses that are not the housing trust fund. And then this non-operating revenues is the housing trust fund.
Yeah.
And then these additional monies are income, a combination of what's expected from
both a contribution to the Housing Trust Fund from the city. So we talked about, I think that's the 15 or the 40 here, plus minus the 10,000 that we pulled out for admin overhead. So we've consolidated all Housing Trust Fund income into this one non-operating revenues line. Sound right?
I want to ask another question.
Yes.
How did we come up with the $10,000? Did I vote for that and not know?
Well, potentially when.
It wasn't, like, we presented that, so it was. So Sarah and I added up what we've been spending on legal and audit fees in 2022. And so like kind of double that for a full year. And then we also looked at how much other nonprofits or fiscal sponsors tend to pay as like a proportion of their net operating income to their fiscal sponsor. And it's roughly the same percentage.
So so our board didn't have any say in how much we wanted to charge?
Well, not exactly. We did discuss this. We've discussed this specific number a couple of times, but this is the first time anyone's asked a question about it.
Yeah, but I've brought this number up multiple times.
Yeah.
Did we vote on, did the board
Haven't
vote on
voted on it,
$10,000 to get up?
No, you haven't voted on it yet. The time that you will be voting on it, I guess, is today as part of the budget. You would be including it as a budgetary line. But it also was in the estimated housing trust fund budget for 2022-23. And I guess that was submitted administratively to the granting agency. Is that what happened? That budget? Right, but that's what I mean. This board didn't approve.
We don't want
approve that submission, is what Teresa's asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to reinvent the wheel, but I really would like it that the board decides, go through some type of finances, looking, get to understand the monies that we need and the monies that we want to collect from, just like you did with the HHA, in a sense.
So in other words, if this is a budgetary number, you want to re-examine that number to see whether or not that's an appropriate allocation for the administrative costs of the Housing Trust Fund?
So well spoken, yes.
Yeah.
I was fine with it when we first spoke about it 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
But it's true that there was a vote
yeah.
Yeah,
we're
on the
gonna be voting
submission,
today.
right?
I mean, for next year, not maybe, I know it, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel this year. I've slept this one, but maybe next year.
Well, so think about it too. I mean, we're talking about a little under 5% of their projected activities. 5% is, 5 to 9% is things I've seen in terms of fiscal sponsorship fees.
Yeah. And because this will be something for every year, so we have to discuss that, like if it's going to be a percentage of their money every year or a set amount, or we're going to vote for a certain amount every year. This is our first year, so
There's also,
we'll learn from our mistakes, so we can learn from what we do, right? Am I wrong?
Sarah and I have been tracking like what the Housing Trust Fund is costing to HCDPA. So if it's something where the audit is a lot higher come the spring, like we can take more from the Housing Trust Fund, like we can edit that. If there's, and also in terms of legal fees too, like that's coming from the Housing Trust Fund, so.
And then bring it to the board. Yeah, and then bring it to the board so we can all discuss it and understand.
Point is to get the most out of the grant and not do like to fulfill.
May I?
Teresa,
I can't hear you.
the mayor said that just reminding us that the point is to get the most out of the grant and the Housing Trust Fund dollars which
Not to make money for HCDPA.
Right.
and especially given that the Housing Trust Fund covers most of its, all of its
All of it.
base costs that
Yeah.
it would incur.
Yeah, and Teresa, remember, because the HTF reports through us, right? So if we get a bill for something that we don't agree that we should be paying, that they should be paying type of a thing, like that's your safeguard.
Yeah.
So it's not like it can go above 10,000 or below the 10,000. It's a recommendation on what to park in order to make sure that there are sufficient funds available to cover the expected legal costs, tax costs, et cetera, whatever it is that we would incur.
Yeah, and contributions toward our audit.
Okay, I can understand that, but I just wanted to be involved next year. Yes, we start peeling off these numbers.
Okay, so it sounds like we want to have a more thorough conversation about this number going forward.
I don't even remember talking about it, Sarah. I don't.
We talked about a lot
I'm
of things.
sorry.
Before.
I mean, we could have.
Some are remembered better than others. The only thing that we have not discussed is representing an ambition or target towards external grant revenues that I think.
Keep them out.
So that means that we will continue to show this loss. But when I was looking at many months ago, Michelle prepared a report for Teresa Kamal and I about other urban renewal agencies. We haven't had a chance to review that as a board yet. But the Little Falls Urban Renewal Agency, for example, is one that Michelle's continually pointed out as like a relevant body for us to look to, because their town's like 4,200 people and they do a lot of work, and their one of their more recent budgets just had a kind of flat estimate of about $200,000 of income like grants. So they do CDBG grants and home grants and different things. So it's conceivable, perhaps not in 2023, but that we could set a target for ourselves, which is what this document is supposed to do, right? It's organizing our sites towards, projecting over the next 5 years. So I'm not sure if that's something the board wants to consider.
What did we get this year? CDG.
What would one?
Yeah.
$500,000.
Yeah, 500,000.
Now, this is another place to potentially talk about the triangulation of relationships between HCDPA and the city in terms of implementing these grants, or what makes HCDPA unique.
So Mayor, the CDG grant was written out of the mayor's office, right?
Yeah,
It's a grant
it's
to
a
the city,
Yeah,
right?
it's a
Yeah.
city.
Right.
Separate.
And may continue to be a city grant, right?
Correct.
So, whether or not so to the extent that the House of Justice Manager is administering that, and that's part of I think that should be recognized, that that's part of the role when we write the contract, right? That's part of the role that the Housing Trust Fund wants to fund as part of that contract. So that's fine, that's the staff cost. But are there other things that you want HCDPA to carry out?
Right.
We
We have to figure out basically,
could do-
your office gets a grant, council gets a grant. The agreement has to say that the HCDPA or the HTF via the HCDPA is the governing body under the ABO is permitted to carry out the administration of the funds.
Yeah.
That's what we're missing
Yeah,
on all fronts, basically, right? Do you understand where I'm going,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so before we would vote on this, get those agreements in place for this, so that there's no question on where those monies are coming from or who is going to be administering them, for lack of a better word.
Right, because you're not going to apply for those grants through HCDPA, right?
No.
You want to compete with
No.
the city.
Correct, because otherwise we cannibalize ourselves because we're
Exactly,
all
yeah.
city recognized entities.
Michelle's got something to say.
I think we're looking at 2024 right now, in the sense that so this grant city one, we're eligible to reapply for annually.
Correct.
Hypothetically, instead of the mayor's office applying for it, it could be HCDPA, and whoever's Sarah's role or someone can be the admin person, and that's $20,000-$30,000 of admin, which can be running the grant out of HCDPA, but could also be funding this position. So it's kind of helping to fund HCDPA through that grant revenue. And it doesn't have to be out of the mayor's office.
And then, but the mayor's office would continue to be critical to executing some of these, like,
So
we're not.
I'm like, Michael and I did a lot of it ourselves. It doesn't have to be done like that. Like you could technically hire, like, it's also something where like I could do some of the application stuff or whatever, but in terms of actual admin, you could hire someone to do all of that. It's also like, if this person in your role, if you want to change your role, you know, whoever someone else has it or something, it's not that much to do the grant admin of these grants, but you're getting $700,000 from that grant to basic account.
Yeah, just a big deal.
So this is something that I think we look at, like, we have to have the right, like, it involves having, it's not just like, you don't get money just for passing through.
Right.
Right.
There have to be some level of work done by this body of HCDPA.
Right.
So I think that's why it also takes a little bit of like thinking about, would this person in your role, would some of the committees want to take on some of that work in the future? I don't see this happening in the coming months. I think see this as building some of the grounds for that.
Right, which is what I'm thinking about is representing it in these lines, representing a goal toward additional state and federal grant incomes. Because that's what these later years are for, unless somebody disagrees, but. It would at least indicate to the ABO that we are not planning to just run at this deficit forever, but we are planning to pursue additional grants. Does that make sense to you, Chris? You seem hesitant.
No, I just want to make sure that we don't have the same grant income showing up on the city's
That's-
budget and on HCDPA's.
Right.
Well, I think we're not talking about the current.
So let's say like, we already won.
Future years.
Yeah, future years.
You could apply for summer 2023
Right.
for new funds.
Right.
And you could, you could win those, if, let's say you apply, you'd win them in like June or July of 2023, you know by then, and you can start executing it by fall 2023. And that's separate brand new, the city already has this year's award.
Right. And is the city already accounting for subsequent renewals of this grant in there?
They don't have the same kind of, they don't have gross reporting.
Oh, so we haven't agreed if that's what's going to happen. There's also the idea of finding other grants to apply to that.
Oh yeah, that's just an example. of
Yeah,
one
it's just an
thing.
example of one that is tangibly.
And it's like we have all the templates and everything, like, we've done all the groundwork, so it'd be easy to redo. I also think, like, you know, my his role is doing grants and things for so many different departments, and so moving some of the housing specific ones to this governmental agency might make some sense too.
And then Chris, do you have any thoughts, totally unprepared, but about what HCDPA's powers are?
Sure, well, I mean, they can certainly administer those kinds of grants if that's what you want to do. And that's pretty typical for one of the things that some of them do. I mean, they were created to buy and sell property, right? That was their reason for living. They were created to acquire property. You've been doing a lot of properties, I mean, at the city level, you've been doing some tax foreclosure properties right, without involving the HCDPA, right? You've just been selling them out of the city.
I'm not sure.
Right? I mean, in other words, you have properties that the city acquired for tax purposes, right? That you have dispositions and so forth. You could consider whether those become part of the HCDPA, you know, whether you title them or whether you just, that's your role is to help facilitate that transaction.
Right.
It's something you could consider. So depends on what you want to do. If you want to essentially help the city with all the housing related programs that the city wants to do.
That's clarifying about the relationship. And so the question on the table is, do we want to represent any additional grant incomes in the budget for subsequent years?
Yeah, I don't want to put anything down that says something failure.
Yeah, I agree.
So then, Teresa?
Repeat the question.
Come
I'm
again?
sorry. Could you repeat the question?
So the question is, do we want to put additional projected hypothetical grant revenues, like in our imagined budget for 2024, 25, and 26, what I should say. But, and the board members present, at least 2 of them have said no. So,
No?
yes.
Said no.
No, it'll be better if we show that we're profitable at the end versus things that we don't know if we're gonna be applying for because we don't know contractually who the work and the responsibility is falling on, right? So rather than putting numbers in where, yes, we think we're gonna make $100, but then nobody's actually owning the application. Again, this goes back to the agreements and who is doing what. I'd rather not get out ahead of it. I mean, Little Falls, in this case, has the ability to fall on and rely on precedent because they've been active and they've been getting it for a while.
Right, we haven't.
So let's not poke that bear. Nobody needs an audit.
That's what we have. Lastly, Michelle, I have $95,000 in for the HTF this year. I think so we're saying that this $95,000 for the HTF will get kicked forward to 2023.
I think some of that's covering my salary for Q3, Q4.
Copy that, okay.
So I think take out 50.
Okay,
So if we're kicking 50 to 23, the
okay,
remainder is for my salary for
Right.
2022.
And your salary comes out of the HTF budget, right?
So for 2022, the first half was 81.
It was
The
81.
second half is HTF.
It was HTF, and for 23,
It's all HTF.
it's all
Plus,
HTF.
like, if we're getting other, like, the grant things, like fees from grants, I'm like.
Right. Well, that's right, and that's the thing, like if HTF's applying for them, then that money can be used for those purposes and whatnot, versus if HCDPA, which is a city entity, is applying for the grant and whatnot, it can't go to support that, and vice versa, if Kamal's office goes and does it, or it's the city through the BEA, that can't go to it either, so I guess, in a question of
No, it can't,
if through the BEA or,
like hypothetically, if like the city is on a grant and some of the money is going to doing admin, then they could pay that. Heather subtracts it from the invoice she gives.
From admin. Yeah,
Then she
okay.
subtracts it from the invoice that she gives to like us for the HTF money.
So our contract with the city for the HTF position is gonna be a net. In other words, it's not gonna say, I'm gonna pay you $40,000 from HCDPA to the city, it's gonna be, I'm gonna pay you $40,000 less the portion of the admin work that's dedicated to a city project that we're not gonna fund?
Right, that's what I'm trying to figure out, right? So the line item for the 40K, right? What is that going to and helping us do? Is that us as pass through, or is that
I'm not sure what line item you're talking
toward administrative costs? Maybe it was on the previous week's one.
Okay.
No, keep this up. Scroll down. That's helpful, thank you. All right, go up, go into the income buckets.
It says this needs to be added. This 20K needs to go into the HTF.
Add those in then,
Yeah.
yeah. And the non-operating revenue for 45 again, remind me.
That's these projected incomes from private sources and municipal sources minus $10,000.
For the administrator, yep,
And the same happens here,
all out of HTF.
all HTF. relevant,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, so then to your question then, this is good because this is like a clear line that's saying that, and I love you, just hear me out on like reporting to the state, right? We as the HCDPA are not funding your position.
Right.
That comes from HTF. That is within your budget and the monies that have come out of the $1 million grant. That's there, okay.
And I'm not a staff.
Right.
Right, correct. So then how do we have to draw the agreement lines?
Well, so.
You see where I'm
Yeah, I know. So let's, two things. Let's take, I think the budget is fine.
The numbers look good.
Right,
The numbers are healthy. I think Kamal's instinct is right about not over-reporting or being overly hopeful
yeah,
for what we want to get, because we would rather go back to the ABO the next year to show that we're on track with a positive record, right? I'd rather under-promise and over-deliver.
Sure.
so if you guys want to approve your budget, then I think then the sort of the fine question is just, let's make sure we know how we're gonna write these contracts, or at least have a sense of. How we're gonna
That's
write
what
these
it comes
contracts.
down
But
to,
that's
right?
not the budget question, so maybe you wanna finish your budget discussion and then we can take that up.
So as far as the estimated revenue numbers, I'm okay with this for 23.
Okay.
So motion,
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
All right,
So now this leaves question for our next meeting, not our continuance, but our next on the agreements, because that's, the public will want to see what the clear delineations are of who accesses what,
Right.
who
So-
administers what, and monies from which grant sources can be used for which purposes.
So let me start with this year, because
Yeah.
we should close out this year.
Okay.
So I need to have you reconcile go back and look at the numbers that were in the prior contract with the city
Correct.
and tell me, do we need to reduce that because we didn't spend it all in the first 2 quarters? And, I think we need to separate the first 2 quarters and the second 2 quarters, because the second 2 quarters are from a different source.
Correct.
They're all from the grant, they're great.
But you want to know if there's anything left that's in
So,
there.
right, is there anything left? So I need to reconcile for the first 2 quarters, is there anything left that didn't get spent? And we should have a final closeout on that agreement.
Well,
Like,
a
how was that money all spent?
A closeout or an agreement to carry forward
Well,
for continuation, whatever purpose.
Whichever, right? But I need a closeout on that.
Correct.
Are you talking about in my position or?
But the agreement, no, the agreement that we had with the city to fund your position and also to fund,
The administrative elements that support it.
was it, whatever that agreement funded?
All basically budget line
Close that
items in that
out,
contract.
okay?
Yeah,
Right, and then for the second half of 2022, third and fourth quarter, that I believe is coming from the housing trust fund unless we're pouring over $6,000 or something from the first 2 quarters that you didn't use or whatever.
right, which is why we need to close out
Right.
one, and then
And then,
legally, this board would need to approve the carryover of this one to the appropriation of those
right,
funds.
and then appropriate X from the housing trust fund for the third and fourth quarters of
Correct.
2022. And that, we write a contract to cover that, but we need the numbers. And then I guess the next thing that we need to do is for 2023, we need to, presumably, we're gonna authorize an extension or whatever, maybe the contract, we talked about that, but we may have to do an
I
extension.
would new contract only because we know the clear source of income for the subsidiary and HTF, and we have a much more clear idea of what we have both in liquid and
So we can have the
non-liquid
contract
assets
and
at
make
this
it into one,
point,
that's
right.
fine. But so that will need a specified dollar amount to be paid from the housing trust fund for XYZ, which is
Correct.
presumably gonna be just the salary, because there's salary, whatever, salary and so forth. And then I guess that's where the $10,000 should also be reflected or not?
Yes, it should be.
No, because the $10,000, you're administering this is the housing trust fund that's coming through HCDPA now, it's not the city's money.
Right, that's correct, but
Right.
like, do you want to make sure, because we voted on it for FY '22, so do you want to make sure that if we're going to be doing one for brand new FY '23, we're covering both things, like the agreement and the salary, and then secondly, that they are agreeing to a $10,000 administrative fee
But I
that
don't think the
supports
city has
HCDPA?
anything to say about the 10,000.
No, the city doesn't, but like, is this the agreements between HTF and,
There's no agreement,
HCDPA.
then it's us. There's no
we're
agreement.
one and the same,
There's gonna
yes,
have to
but,
be probably a resolution to authorize, maybe your own resolution to authorize expenditure of certain funds out of the housing trust fund based on the recommendation of the,
HCDPA.
well, no,
Okay,
HCDPA's
HDF.
resolution based on the recommendation of the HDF committee,
Right.
for expenditure of funds, so that you can document, okay, we authorized $10,000 to use for X.
Next meeting, we come up and we say, we are all in agreement that the housing trust fund and accounting purposes, we will take 10,000 that goes toward the HCDPA's administrative fees.
Or up to
Up
that,
to,
if
up
that's
to
the
is
deal.
better, yeah, for
Um,
financial year 23. And then this way, there's the paper trail of saying, yes, we're aware of where these monies were voted on.
And
to
it's
go.
for, if it's for audit or whatever, it's for,
Correct.
right?
Well, audit always,
How
yeah.
you're gonna allocate that. But I think the salary agreement, is that the only thing that the city is then gonna be billing the HCDPA for? And that's just what's put into there, right? And then if you're talking about trying to allocate your salary, is that what you're saying, partly to a CDP grant? Is that happening in 2023?
It might,
Uh-huh.
we can like have that conversation if that becomes clear. But what I'm saying is rather than using housing trust fund money to pay some of my salary, using some, if I'm performing for the admin work for CDBG, then that would pay some of the salary.
But we don't know exactly how much that's gonna be.
Right.
So it's gonna have to be up to X, but, so who's gonna decide what the allocation of time is? How are you gonna manage that?
Right.
You're gonna prepare an allocation of time and then file that with the city and HCDPA on a regular basis or something like that? So that you're creating a trail for the allocation of, to CDBG and to HDF?
Yeah,
But
this
you're gonna
is,
have some kind of paper trail for allocation, right?
yeah, it has to do with like the tasks I complete for the admin and the hours spent, and that has to be reported for HCR. This is, yeah, it's still, we're still figuring out who's doing what for the grant. So is that the.
Okay, so we're gonna have to put in up to X dollars, and you better give me the total dollar that you would have if you didn't have any CDBG funds
Or.
allocated. And then less the amount that's allocated, determined in accordance with an allocation procedure that's approved by, whatever.
Or do you write it for 23 now?
No, that's what I'm talking about, this is the 23.
No, what I'm saying for 23 is, do you write it now that it is all covered by HDF and we do an amendment midway through the year if any of the other elements come through? I know you want that front, but I'm just trying to think of like,
Banking on
what's,
us waiting to see it, CDBG.
It's gonna take a long time to figure out.
I think this is.
So I think we should put the total amount, Mayor, in, and then, but then say up to that number, and then less the amount that's allocated, the separate salary that's allocated to other purposes that they spend
Yeah,
outside of this. But going forward after 2023, we might want to have an agreement that says HCDPA is gonna do that administration for you if that's what you're gonna do.
Yeah,
But
I
maybe
think
not
it's
for
too early
2023,
for
it's
us
too
right now.
complicated. So you and Michael have some allocations to do.
you're welcome for October math.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
all right. I think it's a sort of.
It's just a question of, it's like, yes, this goes there, but then that's the question of like, where do we put our walls up so we're not
Yeah,
audited on being a pass-through for things that we're not supposed
yeah,
to
I
be
mean, we
passing
can
through.
clearly, either one of you can carry out these functions, we just have to make sure that the paperwork
Correct.
matches.
Correct.
So,
Right. What else do we have on our docket?
for now.
I vote to continue this meeting tomorrow at 9 o'clock.
Or you motion.
I motion. I everything for 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
a second.
Put me down for a name, but I'm coming.
Well, you have to be there for 9:30 tomorrow morning anyway, but we're gonna meet at 9 o'clock anyway, Teresa, just so we can finish off on the
And you
final
said at
resolution.
CEDC.
At CEDC,
At
correct,
CEDC.
which I've already emailed and begged that we can get in there early, so,
So,
yeah,
all in favor?
aye,
Great. You'll take the minutes tomorrow, so I can be there.
yes,
What do we need what do we need? in
I need a
here?
Zoom link.
Need a Zoom?
I need a Zoom link and I need to be made host so I can turn it on from the
Oh, right.
location,
Oh, do we need to Zoom it?
yes,
Okay,
it's continuation of public meeting, so yeah.
although we don't have
And
to have
record
it.
it.
Correct.
Okay, great. All right, so the Zoom link can come from, well, we just need to make sure Michael Hoffman can start it and.
Tell me, it's a good walk for him if he wants to come hang out.
He's like,
Love that.
deep and his office.
But then what piece of paper do we need for tomorrow?
What's the piece of paper? You need to put an agenda, notice of continuation of the meeting up on the website.
Yep.
Please, and also on the, before you walk out of here, probably out here.
With Tracy, yeah.
And I just, what I'm asking for is real brain support, because I don't remember what we're doing.
We're doing the.
Just the.
No,
The option, the
yeah,
option
it's-
plan.
So the agenda is just it's just property disposition.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay, and
right, we just need the option for that. Also, I should have brought it up earlier too, but, on the minutes from last time though, don't mark her as absent, mark her as abstained.
yeah, okay, yeah,
Because she wasn't absent for the vote, she abstained for the vote.
that's right.
Who was on it?
Correct.
There's not a third
But
column.
Teresa,
No.
it cannot be marked as present.
Teresa was
Correct,
marked as
correct, yeah.
absent.
Right,
Yeah.
today.
Yes.
I'll work on that.
Okay.
All right, we'll see everybody in the morning.
I'll
Thanks
see you
for
tomorrow
coming.
morning.
All right.
I'll do that.
I'll be there in the morning.
Okay, and the meeting has been adjourned.
Thanks.
Meeting is adjourned.